Ladies and gentlemen, we are very honored to have the presence of Dr. Gro Brundtland, former Prime Minister of Norway. In 1987, Prime Minister Brundtland chaired the UN World Commission on Environment and Development, and she was the responsible for the Our Common Future report, which also became known as the Brundtland Report. It was through this report that it was introduced the widely accepted concept of sustainable development, which brought the need of balancing economic growth, social progress, and environmental protection, which became later known as the acronym ESG, which we have been using so widely. The report called for intergenerational equity, meaning that the current generation should not only meet its needs, but also look into preserving the interest and the need of future generations. Called for the need of global cooperation, and brought the need of influencing international policy as a means of achieving all these goals. It was through this report that the groundwork was laid for the 1992 Rio Earth Summit, and actually who should be moderating this panel was confirmed, was Ambassador André Correia do Lago, whom you know very well. But Ambassador Correia do Lago, who currently holds also the role of president of COP30 in Belém, he is accompanying the president of Brazil in a mission abroad. So unfortunately, he had to indicate that he would not be attending this event, through which he was confirmed. But the Rio Earth Summit led to the adoption of Agenda 21, the Rio Declaration, and the UN Commission on Sustainable Development. The Brundtland Report also called for holistic solutions to address ESG objectives, and, very important, the need of gender equality, calling for the importance of women and girls to have a key role in achieving the goals of sustainable development. So we are very fortunate, we are very glad to have the presence of Prime Minister Brundtland. She was invited to come to GAFF in 2024, last year, and unfortunately she could not come last year, but we are very glad to receive you, Dr. Brundtland, Prime Minister, and we are anxious to listen to your words here today. Thank you very much.
And thank you for your kind words. And thank you for the invitation to speak at the Global Agribusiness Festival. It is a pleasure indeed to be back here in Brazil, that I have visited so many times over the decades. I have many positive memories from groundbreaking efforts together with you on decisions regarding the environment and on sustainability. Brazil has helped lead the way since the early days. I am honored and delighted to speak on a topic that has driven so much of my time and career, sustainable development. Today, I also serve as a member of the Elders, the group of independent global leaders founded by Nelson Mandela. We are working together for peace, justice, human rights, and a sustainable planet. Engagement with businesses, policymakers, youth, and civil society is at the core of our activities. Environmental considerations as a political and economic force came to life in the 1970s. I was among the first ministers of environment when I was appointed to that position in Norway in 1974. During those years, environmental considerations were seen by most as incompatible with development. The two were considered mutually exclusive. The options were either a clean environment or jobs and well-being. This was the backdrop when the Secretary General of the United Nations in 1983 asked me to establish and lead a new international commission to focus on the increasing threats to the environment. I was keenly aware that it would not be possible to protect the environment without finding a new pattern of development that also took care of people's basic needs. I had listened to Indira Gandhi in 1972 speaking in Stockholm when she made clear, poverty is the greatest polluter. Our task was to explore how we could have both an environment that would sustain future generations, but also their needs and aspirations for healthy lives and prosperity. Particularly, of course, for the billions of people living in abject poverty. I insisted to the Secretary General that I could only lead this new commission if our task was to address both environment and development. The World Commission on Environment and Development produced our report, Our Common Future, in 1987. In it, we called for radical change, for sustainable development, a pattern of development that meets the needs of present generations without compromising, undermining the rights of future generations to meet their own needs. Our Commission's report and recommendations fed into the 1992 Rio Earth Summit, something we proposed in our report. It was impressive, in fact, what world leaders agreed here under Brazilian leadership on climate, on biodiversity, desertification, as well as the Agenda 21 action plan. New and more sustainable patterns of development gradually garnered international support. At the Rio +20 summit, Brazil brokered an agreement to develop the Sustainable Development Goals. And in 2015 in New York, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted. It applied to all countries, rich and poor, and this made possible that same year the adoption of the Paris Climate Agreement. This was a high point of the world coming together to deal with climate and development in a systematic way. Almost 10 years on, global expectations are already extremely high for COP30 in Belém this year. Brazil can mobilize the world to tackle the climate and nature crisis at this pivotal moment of global leadership. As Brazil held the chair of the G20 last year, and now will host the BRIC Summit, as well as the Climate COP30 this year. So, because we are in a decisive decade for climate and nature action, and the success of the multilateral events taking place in the coming months is critical to our common future. We share one solitary, fragile planet. Our common future and the future of the next generations is threatened if we persist with failed economic and political models. We need to be united in this common endeavor for a sustainable future. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals, agreed by all world leaders at the UN in 2015, now cover all countries and all facets of human life and development, from health, education, and the environment, to peace, justice, security, and equality. They aspire to building bridges and collective impact across sectors and issues to inspire shared responsibilities and sustainable patterns of growth. Now, healthy, thriving nature and a stable climate underpin most, if not all, of the Sustainable Development Goals. And the science is clear. Unless we have greenhouse gas emissions and restore nature by 2030, temperatures will rise and ecosystems degrade to a point where large parts of the planet can become unlivable. If we do not tackle this problem, much of civilization as we know it will cease to exist. Thanks to the extraordinary work of scientists and climate leaders, most of the world now recognizes the problem. To a large extent, political leaders know what needs to be done, but countries are greatly unequal, both in their share of responsibility for the problem and in their capacity to solve it. They also have diverse and competing interests, and so far, they have not been able to act meaningfully and decisively enough with the urgency that is required. As a result, we have too often been moving at the pace of the least ambitious countries. Unfortunately, the same can be said of our progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. Many of the recommendations in our 1987 report are still relevant today, 38 years later. Progress has been far too slow. Today, we are far behind to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. 1/3 of the targets have even seen progress stall or move backwards. Some conclude that only 17% have been achieved. As the UN Deputy Secretary General has said, future generations deserve more than 17% of a sustainable future. And the barriers, they are plain to see. Lack of financing, geopolitical tensions and conflicts, climate and nature breakdown, growing inequality, and rising misinformation. A crippling debt crisis that is undermining many countries' ability to invest in sustainable development. Climate impacts are coming harder and faster than anyone expected. Biodiversity loss is accelerating at an alarming rate. When I was last in Brazil, severe floods in the south of the country, in Rio Grande do Sul, killed and injured hundreds and displaced 500,000 people. Later, heat waves and the country's worst drought on record, and refueling terrible wildfires. Now, food systems, of course, are the primary driver of biodiversity loss. The way we produce food is having cascading impacts on both nature and climate. How we produce, process, and package food is responsible for over 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions. As you are aware, here in Brazil, the transition to regenerative food production must be equitable and actively support farmers, fishers, and others whose livelihood depend on these resources. Now, of course, the urgency is the major change since my original report from 1987. We have to move fast. The climate and diversity deadlines are there. The crisis give us deadlines. If we are late in fighting these existential crises and we cross tipping points, some of which will be irreversible, the other sustainable development goals will slip even further out of reach. So the midpoint of this decade must be a wake-up call. We can still create a more sustainable, inclusive, and resilient world. So we have a critical opportunity, one we must seize and seize now. As you know, last year, countries met in Cali, Colombia for the biodiversity COP16, where they submitted the national biodiversity strategies and action plans. These plans are critical to deliver on the global nature goal to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. By 2030, by protecting 30% of land and sea for nature, also known as the 30 by 30 goal. Now, ahead of the climate COP30, governments will submit their national plans and 2035 climate targets to meet their pledge under the Paris Agreement. My hope is that this together will keep the rising global temperatures within the limit of 1.5 degrees. Now, it is dramatic to think that the G20 countries are responsible for 80% of global emissions. So they need to lead by example to deliver on their pledges. As host of COP30, Brazil has a prominent international role. It's important that Brazil is engaging the whole world in a global mutirão, getting everyone to engage in a common goal. So Brazil has a unique opportunity and responsibility to lead. And we know also its own domestic policy will be under increased scrutiny. As a major commodities exporter and a large oil producer, there is an opportunity for Brazil to truly lead the way with a 1.5 degree aligned, nationally determined contribution, which showcases how Brazil will deliver a just transition out of coal, oil, and gas and into renewable energy. A transition that delivers for people and planet. Climate and nature action deliver environmental benefits critical to sustain life on Earth. It also benefits in terms of economic development. Here in Brazil, renewable energy in the sun-soaked and windy Northeast is creating new jobs, paving the way for new generations of energy workers. Brazil's ecological transformation plan, Brazil's version of Europe's Green Deal, and the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act is attracting new investments to the country, reopening doors to international investment and finance. Brazil is second only to China in the number of renewable energy jobs that have been created. The bioeconomy potential of a standing rainforest and of sustainable agricultural practices is far greater than any short-term driven deforestation and ecosystem degradation. The Brazilian Amazon alone could create an $8 billion bioeconomy each year. Now, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, the world's largest coalition of financial institutions, about 700 banks, investors, and insurers committed to transitioning the global economy to net zero greenhouse gas emissions, is partnering with Brazil to turbocharge funding for clean energy and efforts to restore nature, such as reforesting the Amazon rainforest. If you cast your mind back to a few years ago for comparison, investors with trillions of dollars of assets were withdrawing or threatening to withdraw from investments with deforestation risks. Global supermarket brands had also dropped some Brazilian products for the same reason. Brazilian companies do stand to further benefit from the global green investment rush with the country's adoption of the new global standards for corporate sustainability reporting developed by the International Sustainability Standards Board. Because transparent, consistent, and robust reporting is essential for businesses to demonstrate their progress in cutting emissions and for responsible investors to know where to direct their money. Well, when you look around, it is today alarming to register the rhetoric against engagement on environment, social, and governance, and so-called woke capitalism. This has been a growing trend among populist right-wing politicians, particularly in the US, and now even more dominating during the Trump administration. We have seen an orchestrated pushback, particularly emanating from Republican states, against U.S. investors and insurers who integrate the climate risks into their own business models. The truth of the matter is that businesses need to put sustainability at the heart of their decision-making for the sake of humanity and their own bottom line. Today, all serious business leaders will nod in agreement, realizing that every one of the world's industries is also dependent upon the health of the planet. It was not always like this. When I was a young environment minister in 1979, I was asked to give a keynote speech at the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos. The topic was the quality of life in the 1980s. I was the only female speaker in a totally male-dominated meeting. In my speech, I focused on justice, democracy, the environment, and the role of women in a just and productive society. I said that all actors would be responsible for a better future. Well, the response was utter silence on all these critical issues. What I heard instead was that when it comes to all social and environmental concerns, the onus is only on governments. Business at that time thought their only responsibility was their own economic bottom line. So I do feel fortunate to have seen considerable progress over the last few decades. There has been a gradually growing awareness that the threats of climate and nature breakdown require both public and private, cross-sector and cross-country, close collaboration. Now, you have noticed that today the word sustainability is sometimes thrown around so much it can feel like a buzzword, with a small number of bad faith actors engaging in greenwashing. But the reality is that for forward-looking businesses, sustainability is not a buzzword. It is what will ensure the longevity of their business. I believe most of you here understand that sustainability is not only about doing the right thing for people and planet, but importantly also about building resilience in your supply chain and ensuring the durable competitiveness of your business in a society that is demanding ever greener, cleaner, and fairer alternatives. So I would urge you to bring your voice to the political table, demand the policies that will enable a race to the top, that will enable your investments in sustainable innovations, that will remove environmentally harmful subsidies, and create a level playing field for forward-looking businesses. I also invite you to ramp up climate and nature action within your value chain and develop robust net zero transition plans. Plans that are aligned with 1.5 degrees and the recommendations of the UN high-level expert group on net zero. But first and foremost, I would urge you to increase investment in sustainable development and innovation, to pioneer the business solutions for a sustainable future across a range of sectors, including energy, transport, construction, agriculture, and manufacturing. Many of you are already actively developing more sustainable solutions that reduce emissions and support biodiversity. These transitions can be accelerated with the right policy decision and research subsidies. You can all play a critical role. Climate and nature action from the business world help send clear signals to governments, which can spur them to set progressive legislation that supports the sustainability efforts, in turn spurring even more companies to follow your lead. Investment in sustainable solutions, both developing new ones and supporting the uptake of existing solutions, requires support from the investment sector. The sector has already taken important steps to mobilize more climate and nature-friendly investments in recent years. But there is still much more to be done, particularly in low and middle-income countries. It is also time for more transparency and accountability at all levels of society to deliver the climate and nature action today's younger generations and tomorrow's future generations deserve. Increasing transparency and increasing accountability to shareholders and boards for delivery of science-based targets is critical to measure progress and ensure a true level playing field for sustainable businesses. Our world stands at a precipice. We can continue on a reckless path towards runaway catastrophic climate change and more irreversible destruction of nature. Or we can unite to address the climate and nature crisis before it is too late. The scientific and economic analysis is clear. The benefits of transitioning more quickly to a greener, cleaner future by far outweigh the costs. But the benefits and costs are not equally shared or fairly distributed either within individual countries or around the world. It is only through a just transition that we will be able to move fast enough. Delivering a just transition means to deliver for people and planet. For people meaning those directly and indirectly impacted, the workers, the entire supply chain, the local communities. And for planet meaning for biodiversity, to support and restore vital ecosystems and our life support system. The multilateral institutions we have are not perfect. In many ways, they are a mirror of the political will from our leaders, and it means we move too often at the pace of the slowest movers. But the corporate world has a very powerful voice. Forward-looking business leaders must push our governments to accelerate the climate and nature transition. We need to secure a safer, fairer, cleaner, healthier, and generally more sustainable future for our world. And to all of you, I say, we can only do it if we do it together. Thank you so much.
O orgulho de ser brasileiro está em quadra.
Brasil, vamos!
Vamos juntos fazer história. Ponto a ponto. XP, investidora oficial do João Fonseca.
AgriConnection. Ative a rede que vai transformar o agro.